나는 그저 서 있을 뿐이었어.
I am NetMoverSitan. Welcome to part 2 of the Chapter 1 lore. Yes, there's that much to cover. I didn't want to do it all in one video. Okay, what has happened so far? Let's see. They were travelling through the back streets of District 4, where we found out that Mephistopheles was fueled by people, where it involved extracting epkephalin, something becoming increasingly rare since the fall of Lobotomy Corporation. And then, with the help of their guide, Yuri, a wing remnant, like Gregor apparently is, they started the exploration of branch D-02, and then Aya, one of the fixers that was part of the office that took her in, was impaled by one of the thorns of the Ebony Queen's apple, the aberration of Snow White's apple that they had to fight in order to progress any farther than that. Although before that, Faust instructed Dante on how to heal the damn dozen, in a way that didn't require them to die. And now, the continuation. Heathcliff, after fighting that abnormality, or aberration, or whatever you want to call it, was expecting more. Ishmael understood that suppressing abnormalities was a dangerous task, although Faust mentioned that the Quepoff deterrence was in action. Oh, so still working even though the branch was appearing to fall apart. Heathcliff did not understand, so Faust told him that it weakens abnormalities in order to safely supervise them in containment. This deterrence will weaken as they continue their assignment in collecting more golden bars. Ishmael understood that it will only get worse as they progress. Then Dante asked where the corpse went, and Otis complimented his command while noting that they did indeed defeat it, although Gregor ruled out the theory that they disappeared into the sky due to the tough ceiling. Yuri then pointed out the egg. Faust referred to this as the core of the abnormality, the form it takes when suppressed. Yuri then added that it will hatch if given enough time to do so. Heathcliff was annoyed by this, and Ishmael was concerned that they won't truly die. Faust confirmed this, as it was one of the factors of L-Corp's energy production. Yuri's job was to put it back in containment, but those days are over. Ishmael wanted to know what to do with this. Faust told her that Limbus Company had a dedicated department to dealing with them. They'll retrieve them. Yes, Yuri called them the After Team. Rodia asked why they can't be called now. Faust pointed out that it's because communication was on the bus, or more specifically the equipment needed to do so. Gregor didn't like this, but Faust didn't see this as a problem, as they'd go back whether they wanted to or not. Then they went down the floor, and this made Yuri feel uneasy. She didn't think that she'd come back there. Faust noted that most of the facilities of Lobotomy Corporation consisted of multiple floors. Each floor had an abnormality marking its domain. Well, at least one, anyway. Rodia didn't like it that there'd be more of them. Gregor wanted to know where she found out about this. Faust just said that she knew it all. Yuri remembered that the Before team does reconnaissance in advance. Gregor took that as her having ties to the staff. Faust didn't deny that. Ortiz understood that a great threat should be expected on every floor. They needed to make sure that they were out of danger in at least one direction, so that they aren't forced to take them down as they go. Faust couldn't put it better. Yisang asked if she didn't like it that they got that before she verbalized it. Faust told Dante that it was time to see the star, much to their annoyance as they were the manager, not a scapegoat. If anything, Dante, unfortunately it's sad to say this, but you're seen as a glorified field medic, with as much respect as those in the medical profession in reality. And that's not a lot. That's the problem, isn't it? Then they encountered another remnant of G-Corps. This one appeared to have a higher rank. He recognized Gregor, addressing him as manager. Apparently this was the head manager of his team. And this head manager saw Gregor as a terrible deserter that took the lives of his comrades. While Gregor saw that the war ended a decade ago, give or take, so it might be that war. But Gregor was able to let go of these obsolete ranks, unlike his head manager, who saw that they were fighting for their lives on the battlefield to this day. Gregor saw himself as not that different. The head manager then went on to say that there was only one verdict for deserters. Gregor was dismissive of this, as it was against company policy to carry out summary execution for personal vengeance. The head manager didn't care, and so they were forced to fight him and those loyal to him. They were shackled to their past. Yes, they were defeated, and the head manager was dying. Seeing Gregor as once well respected, although this was something that he never asked for. The head manager warned him not to proceed any further, as only hell awaited him. Gregor couldn't do that, or he'd get fired. The head manager didn't like that he abandoned his honor for a pittance. Gregor sold that long ago, along with his medal. Well, he needed to pay the landlord somehow. The head manager saw him as no different from them. Nothing but disgusting pests. Well, the main difference between him and you are, well, he won't stay dead. Then Gregor asked for one of Ryushu's death sticks. She complied, but it wasn't for him. It was for the now dead head manager. Well, he didn't want to share the one he was using. This was mildly annoying to Ryushu. As they continued forward, Ishmael noted that the G-Corp remnants were nowhere to be seen from that point onwards, Sinclair repeating the warning of the head manager. They found bodies that had clearly been there for some time. Yuri identified them as her former co-workers, all killed by blunt instruments. They even had management reports, documents containing instructions for keeping abnormalities in check. Not usually carried as employees memorized them. Yi-sang didn't think that they had the necessary information. when it breached. Heathcliff was annoyed by this, but held himself back. Yuri thought that the eggs were to move back into containment. Ishmael asked what kind of abnormality could have massacred all these employees. Then they noticed that there was some gas. Ishmael was the first of these to notice, mentioning that Hopkins' office purchased an expensive device the other day. Heathcliff didn't know what he was on about. He mentioned toxic gas levels rising after a certain floor. He was wearing a gas mask at this point. Then Rudyard noticed bleeding coming out of her ears. Even Don Quixote was not feeling so good. And this was a normal response for what they were being exposed to. Rudyard wanted to know why he's so fine. Yuri recognized this as an anti-abnormality gas grenade, something that Hopkins knew about and refused to tell them about, as one clearly had went off somewhere between those bodies that they found. The fact that he had a gas mask showed this. It showed that he was prepared for this, which, as Faust pointed out, they weren't provided with such supplies. Sorry, Roger. Heathcliff wanted to bash Hopkins' skull in, but he was quickly rendered incapable of doing anything meaningful. Then Faust said something that didn't help. Basically, the more agitated they were, the faster the toxin would spread. As for why Yuri wasn't told about this, Hopkins basically saw her as an expendable asset, one that was easily discardable when she outlasted her usefulness. The only thing stopping that from happening sooner was Aya was taking pity on her. Apparently Heathcliff, after hearing that, was disgusted by his behaviour. Hopkins saw everything as fair game for a fixer. Well, that's certainly in this case. He was initially impressed by them being associates of the Red Gaze, but now he saw them as just a ragtag bunch of lunatics who thought that it would be a good idea to walk straight into that place with zero preparation. Well, he's not wrong there. Heathcliff saw this as a sick joke, and to be honest with you, I can't blame him, as there are syndicates that care more about their own than your average fixer. With the latter, treachery and deceit are as natural as breathing. In fact, it doesn't even need to be for financial reasons. They probably do that just to get the last portion of Pagion. Although in this case, he took with him a large amount of enkephalin with their help. He'll write in his reports, but they went missing, as suffocated to death would be too embarrassing. Then all but Dante were starting to fall to their knees from the gas. Thankfully, Gregor had something to remember Aya by, but it was useful for Yuri right now. Her gas mask. She would need this more than he would, as unlike her, he can be brought back. Then Yuri talks about how she was getting recognition from an office of strangers, doing all kinds of errands day and night. Then she remembered that day, when the seed of light was released and the branches were sealed. It was 3 minutes before the branch was locked down. The door was about to close on her. Alex called for Yuri to not leave her behind. She asked if it was so wrong that she survived while the rest were left for dead. The branches were sealed to prevent the abnormalities from being released. Gregor understood it to be a sin down there. Ishmael thought that stung. Gregor didn't think it mattered. She got to live. Guilt on herself would wear her out from within. After he died, she and Dante were the only ones there. Then Dante was somehow able to convey that he could bring them back. They then moved the bodies outside of the range of the gas, so that Dante could painfully bring them back to life. Sometime after this, Dante asked if abnormalities were responsible for all the deaths of the employees. Yuri doubted that, as if she's right, it's something different to that. Then Rutis pointed something out to them, a figure with a clay mask that resembled a Mayan stonework. One that sounded tired, asking if they were there to draw their lot, to gather all their IDs and give it to them. Then they'd find a winner, and the ID on that individual with this clay mask was identified as Alex. And Heathcliff wanted to know what she meant by that. Yuri went on to explain that some required regular offerings. Yes, some abnormalities required that. Alex warned them not to go that way. They'll find them. Yuri asked if the offering happened. Alex simply said that it was her time to draw. Well, that isn't wrong, as the nameless fetus was another example of an abnormality that this can happen with, if it's displeased with the wrong work done on it. I think nothing there has a similar arrangement as well, except that one's more dangerous. Well, one of the LFs does anyway. Anyway, Ishmael asked what would happen if no sacrifice was made, and Yuri told them that they didn't want to put that to the test. Ishmael guessed that it escaped and butchered any that it found. Heathcliff thought it was a spineless one, as it's clear to him that the wounds were human in origin. They were beating the out of each other. He then went on to explain that they could survive a while even after the branch was buried, in the hopes that they might get rescued. This kept going for a few months. They were drawing lots to keep the abnormality in check. The one chosen would need to be dragged away to be sacrificed. Yes, like the sacrificial victims of the culture that the abnormality appears to be based on. Alex was the last survivor, who put on a stone mask. Well, a clay mask, or whatever you want to call it. She put that on her head. Ishmael theorized that she believed that it would spare her from being sacrificed. That's wishful thinking. But Yuri refused to believe this, as she believed that Alex wouldn't kill others to save herself. Heathcliff wasn't so sure. In fact, she didn't even know if this was Alex. Then Alex gave them a tip to leave before they came to take them. Ortiz advised that they move on, as Alex didn't have long left. But Yuri stayed behind a little longer, telling Alex that it wasn't her fault. Alex told Yuri to leave her behind. Dante went back to make sure that she was with them. And after that, they encountered the Doomsday Calendar. Now this abnormality was new. One with an M classification. Like the monuments. Yes, this abnormality that has a Mayan theme, and also themed around the calendar that some saw as a sign that 2012 would be the end of the world. It had stone mask minions that can make the targets bleed and also burn, depending on what the core abnormality was doing. The only way to reduce its damage potential was to appease it with blood sacrifices. They did so and weakened it. This was also useful when it was in a fiery mood, but they were forced to launch everything they had before a more indiscriminate and powerful attack could be unleashed on them and wipe everyone out. After that, they healed up and found themselves on the floor that had maggots, which Dante saw as mild compared to the last abnormality. Rodia saw that Gregor would be glad to hear that, but Gregor had his own concerns, hearing someone that caught his attention. All Ishmael could hear is Rodia's constant growl, coming from her stomach, which embarrassed Rodia. Gregor walks ahead, and then opened a door into a room. It was a containment unit, according to Yuri. It had a golden light coming out of it. They then found themselves in a violent place, full of fighting, weapons firing, cries and screams. Otis recognized it as a battlefield, and Gregor recognized it, but Heathcliff wasn't sure what was going on. What else is new? But in this case, it's more than usual. Faust saw that they were close to a golden bar, as did Ishmael. Otis knew where they were and when. Dante, of course, didn't know, and Otis made an excuse for them. Ishmael thought it was a pathetic excuse. Ignoring this, Otis saw that the flags of the differing factions... Yes, the differing factions indicated that it's 90 days into the Smoke War. Ah yes, that war. The war that it was started by Ain with the help of Benjamin, Lady Diaz and the Ujat, all to take over District 12 and set off the chain of events that have repercussions that are still ongoing. Then Heathcliff was tugged from behind. A G-Corp soldier wanted them to get to a shelter. Apparently due to the risk of rapid aging due to a bomb's blast, much as the outpost next to theirs has suffered. Likely due to T-Corp weapons? Heathcliff didn't know what was going on. Then the soldier noticed Gregor and saluted him. It was Toma from Biomimetics Maintenance. Yeah, I suspect that's the kind of guy you go if your biomimetic weapon starts to go unstable. In fact, he wasn't expecting Gregor to be this far back, and was willing to help him get back to the front line, as his augmentation on his legs allowed him to jump high. Toma didn't recognize Rodia, but Gregor was able to explain her as a new hire that had not long had her procedure. He'd deal with her. Toma believed him, as it meant that G Corp was getting desperate to send unprepared employees to battle. Gregor quickly apologized and they went away from Toma. He wanted answers from Faust about what was going on there. Faust explained that these were basically his memories, an open path to his psyche. They moved on from there, and Yuri was feeling nauseous. Faust described it as psychogenic pressure. Then we saw some of Gregor's past, where he recalled a nightmare that happened in reality, where he was in a room with only two colors, turquoise and red, the latter being an apple swinging. As for how he was to get out of there, he just needed to stretch out his arm and cut the hanging apple. He was observed by people in blue coats. They explained it to him over several days, over and over. That wasn't a problem. It was something else. He gave up thinking about it, and then the apple was sliced, and the door was open. He didn't even remember what drove him to do that. All to break free. Break free from that nightmare. Then he was talked to by a woman, told to chop up the apples in front of him, and that it was his 15th birthday. Although he found himself transformed into a hideous pest, he kept cutting apples in half of varying consistencies. But he realized that he was still in that nightmare. Then they found themselves still in the battlefield. Gregor saw it as such, but Yuri noticed it as slightly different. Then Heathcliff was tugged from behind by Toma as before, who had more insect parts growing out of him, repeating the sentence about the aging bomb. He then saluted Gregor, who mentioned that his arm regenerated. It was revealed that their director, Hermann, was the one that fitted his biomimetic weapon. Toma offered to give Gregor a ride to the front line, with the help of wings that emerged from his back. He was confused why they were running, when they should raise G-Corp's banner and take the lead on the front lines. Gregor was dreading this, as Toma had more insect features sprouted from him. Rodion didn't like the fact that they'd need to fight them again. Ultis threatened to punish her for insubordination for her display of weakness, but changed her tone when Dante thought that they should run, based on the fact that this was an illusion of something that happened over a decade previously. This irritated Heathcliff. Faust, on the other hand, didn't think retreat was an option. Clearly she knows something they don't. Ishmael was confused. She didn't think that it was this foul, when everyone working for G-Corp had modifications. Faust mentioned that accounts might vary, as what they were seeing was based on Gregor's feelings more than his memories. Yuri saw this as how he felt about his own allies. She asked if all of them received the augmentation procedure. Gregor mentioned that most did. She asked if it was done by consent. And then Gregor asked back if L-Corp employees offered themselves up by consent. According to Yuri, it was in the contract, but they weren't properly informed. Skipped for efficient management, to face the fear, agreeing to it knowingly or not. so she can guess how well that went for G-Corp. Then they were back in a familiar place, where when Gregor was asking why Yuri was delaying, apparently the gas mask fell off. Otis saw it as dead weight, having no practical purpose now. Well, it's because of it's Aya's memento. Otis saw it as the most pointless activity in the world, and she's not even from N-Corp. Okay, are N-Corp the wing that recruits the most morally bankrupt and the insane? And this is based on them only trusting what they see, like the mad artists of the ring. Ishmael instructed her on how to tie knots better, specifically a sailor knot that she learned on the boats, offering to teach her how to do it when they get back to the bus. Yuri thanked her. Heathcliff wanted to know what was going on, and Roger suggested that she join Limbus Company, which surprised Yuri. Faust was about to say it, but Roger said it instead, and she said that it needed to be cleared by either Virgilius or his superiors. But it's a suggestion that's worth making. Faust was warming to the idea, and Roger even thought pink hair made a perfect mascot to represent them. This made Yuri smile faintly, possibly out of embarrassment. Then Gregor had a flashback. It was after the Smoke War. And based on the old G-Corp's collapse, he was on the losing side. And he was trying to avoid drawing attention to himself. Yet he was still not recognized, despite being the poster boy, which was artistic license as, he'd not make the face in the poster if he didn't leave a lasting impression. He also questioned who made the poster, as the hair on the biomimetic arm was certainly grotesque, about as much as it was real. Being consumed by the nightmare for so long made him crave loneliness. Yet on the subway, he heard someone say that the scum from G-Corp should be sent to the gallows. Hearing about this, he started to feel nauseous, attracting a concerned person to him. Then Roger snapped him back to reality. The others weren't aware of this, as they were still on the battlefield. He wanted a death stick to calm him down, but then he had something else to be concerned about. The others knew what was coming. Dante said it. Toma was about to grab them and give a warning, but instead, a heavily insectoid Toma appeared, and Roger was frustrated by the repeated line about insanity and the aging bomb. But it wasn't that which was the problem. It was giant hands with nail varnish, and feet with high-heeled shoes crushing the G-Corp soldiers. Himself among them, as he was saying that he didn't want to get crushed mid-sentence. Dante then said, "Run!" in response. In his ticking language. How I'd put it is, "Leg it!" But it's largely the same, and the others agreed. Otis being one of them. Heathcliff was worried about being flattened by this giant, asking Faust for any ideas. And she didn't have a quick answer. much to Don Quixote's irritation. Rodia didn't want to recover a flattened body, and then she apologized after realizing how horrible that sounded. Dante didn't see this as a good time to say anything, as he saw that it would accomplish nothing. After a short while, Heathcliff angrily asked if Faust had thought of anything that could help them, if she was still thinking, and she'd yet to think of a plan. They've not got to the Golden Boar. Now, Dante would have responded strongly otherwise, if that was the case. Heathcliff's annoyance was increasing. He stopped talking as prioritizing avoiding getting flattened was higher. A little later, Yuri was asking for Gregor. Heathcliff was asking what the holdup was. Gregor understood that world was a product of his mind. He hesitated to say what was next, as he knew that it would sound crazy, even by Don Quixote's standards, that they shouldn't run away from that hand. Heathcliff thought that was crazy. Faust asked if he was sure. Apparently free will never played much in Gregor's life, believing that resisting was meaningless in that reflection of his mind, deciding that letting it happen might be the best answer. Heathcliff can't believe what he's hearing! And Ishmael couldn't see any alternative as they were all exhausted. Besides, he recognized the paint on the nails. Gregor knows whose hand that was, and she will not stop chasing them. He then asked for Faust's confirmation that this is the path in his heart, that it's about to hit a dead end. Nightmares on the road. He never once strayed from that woman's control, likely the one that gave him his arm. Dante wasn't sure what he meant, but Heathcliff couldn't think of any better plans. Then a giant hand descended and grabbed them. Then it went dark, and they found themselves in a corridor back in branch D-02. Then Dante found a containment unit that was different from the others. Faust noticed this as well, from observing them, as this was this was most likely where the Golden Bowl was located. Gregor thought it was an achievement to make it this far. Yuri asked, when they get back to the bus, could she teach Charon how to use the map? Gregor thought it to be good, that he's sure that she'll like it. Sinclair believes otherwise. And Yuri thought that it was a nice thing to have a place to go back to, knowing that she can't go back to her office, seeing that Hopkins was now the operator, and he's made his thoughts on Yuri quite clear. And besides, I doubt he'd want anyone to contradict his narrative. Then they fought the Golden Apple, which has a number of mythological references, such as Eris, the Greek goddess of discord, throwing one into the ceremony, among other gods and goddesses, to sow discord. It's also something owned by an Irish sea deity, which were musical rather than edible. There was even something based on a number of Russian folk legends where 13 princesses played with them. Regardless, this abnormality started off as a golden apple with limbs that largely took the beating, but it didn't stop it from dishing it out. Then it revealed its true nature, revealing the rot within. Think Applin evolving into Appleton, but much less pleasant to look at. That basically sums up what it looks like. They fought hard against this. Then it seemed dead, and Yuri went up to inspect it. One of the damned dozen went with her, but while that member of the damned dozen could get away, Yuri was not fast enough, and she was consumed by it. Then her head appeared attached to the abnormality. Her head was a part of it now, all to torment the others, especially Gregor. This wasn't Yuri, as she was usually slouched, as all she was motivated by was to carry the wills of her late colleagues that she left for dead. Dante made it clear to Gregor that this wasn't Yuri, and Gregor was fully aware of that. He outstretched his biomimetic arm, intending to finish this abnormality off. Yet he hesitated. He still saw this abnormality as Yuri. Yuri saying that she didn't want to die. Dante then ordered him to cut her down, to shout loud enough to be louder than this Yuri. And then Gregor had a flashback when his biomimetic arm lost control. He was able to keep just enough control, however, to prevent it from reaching a civilian's throat. One that it narrowly avoided killing, who offered him money to spare them. A security guard then ordered him to let her go, otherwise they'd stop him by force. Gregor then told him to cut his arm off, and the security guard did so, understanding that he doesn't have full control over his arm. But peace, unfortunately, was temporary, as that arm had a healing factor. He then warned everyone to stay away from him. Then we snap back to the present. Yuri had the utmost respect for manager Gregor, and Gregor didn't feel deserving of it, as he didn't fight in the smoke war because he wanted to. Then Yuri asked if it was so wrong that she survived. Gregor told her to live on. They didn't get into this mess voluntarily. Then someone appeared, finding it regrettable that they're at the end, only to be stopped just before their labour bore fruit. They'd be taking this unclaimed opportunity as it would be none void otherwise. And this individual then cuts the head off instead of Gregor, and the golden bar came out of the mouth. A trio emerged. Yes, emerged, and they knew about the golden bar as well. The woman was Herman, the one that attached Gregor's unique biomimetic arm, who believed that they'd be seeing each other often. The reason being, they needed those bars, and they were quite capable of finding them. They wouldn't die, but they would kill them. It just wouldn't be on this occasion. They'd take good care of the golden bar that they found. One of the males was Gubo, one under N-Corp's employ, who had the glass window technology, a more unstable variant of Yisang's mirror technology. Yes, he tried to leave Virgilius to die in Leviathan to save himself and Azia, the scientist responsible for the glass window technology. Yi Sang was also familiar with him, calling him his compatriots. Gubo mentioning that only few remain now. I suspect that we'll find out more when we eventually get to Yi Sang's story. The other male was familiar to Honglu, his brother, Jia Huan. Now, the way he spoke when he ridiculed Honglu's filthy clothes, saying, if only your family was there to see his state. That implied that they're either half-brothers, step-brothers, or he was adopted. Utis was not amused by this reunion. Herman asked how her present was treated, calling Gregor her son, seeing him as an investment, disappointed in him being such a mess. Gregor told her that he didn't once ask for that. Herman sadistically told him that he should at least finish unwrapping what she gave him. Apparently the arm isn't all there is to it. Then Jia Huan said enough greetings and claps, which allowed them to get away before the damn dozen knew what was going on. Sometime later, they arrived back at the bus, their mission failing miserably. He thought that it would be an easy mission. Virgilius, I mean. And then they allowed the golden bar to be taken from them, and they walked in without any shame. Had he overestimated them? Virgilius, you're expecting a team that's dysfunctional at best, and are clearly not by choice to be cohesive? He then asked for an excuse from Faust. She realized that immortality wasn't the solution to everything. Then he asked Dante, who mentioned that another group was after the Golden Bow, asking why he didn't warn them, if he knew about this. Well, he certainly knew about Gubo. Virgilius asked if they were holding him responsible. He asked Dante why would he send 12 combatants to a place with no threats, along with hiring fixers as well, fixers that largely proved to be more a hindrance than a help. Gregor wanted the blame put on him. Virgilius was almost impressed by the camaraderie between them, covering up for each other, since they're all on the same boat and it was the Titanic. As sticking up for each other doesn't make up for their incompetence. Then Faust reported that the after team, Spec Ops Section 4, went underground for their part. Virgilius understood this as salvaging the EGO and abnormalities. A shame about the Golden Bar. Ortis was getting annoyed by this. She understood what Field Marshal Helmuth von Moltke, the Elder, meant when he said, "No plan survives first contact with the enemy." Failure happens. If the objective isn't met, devise a new plan and redeploy. Asking if it was his expectations that were too high for their first mission. She thought Dante's performance was nothing short of outstanding. Virgilius didn't think that she was entirely wrong, and was willing to put this aside for now. Dante was too tired to pay much attention to their surroundings, nor did they want to change their clothes. They were all silent due to their abject failure, Gregor most of all. Then he hung the gas mask near the windshield of the bus. Kauran asked why he put that on Mephi's head. Apparently it was a memento of Aya and Yuri. Apparently he also had a sister around Yuri's age. Dante decided against talking right now. Yeah, Ishmael was grieving, Sinclair was weeping quietly, Rodier was clearly distressed. So, if they couldn't lighten up this mood, he stood no chance. Just before they continued their journey, Virgilius asked if it would get in the way, and Kauran said no. Then he told her to hit the road to the next golden bar, hoping that it would be better in the next mission, wherever it would take them. Now let's go over the rest. Now, District 4 appears to have a lot of trees and is more attuned to nature, based on this grass maiden that Don Quixote mentioned, being a significant person there, as her journey was apparently well known. Then we have their back streets. They resemble slums and aren't as well built or as tightly packed as other back streets. Then we have Virgilius, who is more ruthless than he was in Leviathan, perhaps due to a combination of not being his own boss within Limbus Company, him having no connections with the damn dozen, or Dante, and him needing to be more ruthless based on his more relaxed attitude, resulting in most of his office being wiped out, and those that did survive, that didn't betray him, aren't what they used to be. He's not above threatening torture for those that don't carry out orders, or getting in his way. Although, he does have the sense to make rules for them, such as no fighting inside the bus to prevent them from killing each other unnecessarily. Well, if they are to die, they'll do so in battle against the enemy. Thankfully, he's also selective with who is fed into Mephistopheles. Well, if they're going to kill people to refuel their bus and access alternates, it's better to do so using the guilty. Then we have Dante. They have the power to invert time for the damn dozen and even heal them when they're alive. But it's pure agony for them. Yes, they swallowed the time, let them rewind. They ask why can't anyone feel their hurts, that their heaven, as in continued life, is the source of their torment. Yeah, it's clear that the song In Hell We Live Lament is his theme, not helped by them being treated with less respect than a dog that's decided to constantly hump your leg when you're in the middle of something important. As for the damn dozen, it's implied that all but Faust and Virgilius didn't join by choice. Sinclair's reaction when asked about that would seem to imply that. Let's now talk about fallen wing remnants. Now, when a wing falls, like the old G-Corps, the remnants often find it hard to get employed. Now, Yuri was fortunate enough to get recruited by a fixer office. A few of the survivors of the Lobotomy Corporation branch featured in Wonderlab formed the Bloom office. The remnants of the G-Corp that came before the one that had gravity manipulating spheres as its singularity, was much less fortunate. They were destitute, partially due to them having insect parts as a side effect of their biomimetic weapon augmentation. Now, why did that G-Corp collapse? Was it because they were on the wrong side of the smoke war? Was it because the biomimetic weapon augmentation process was more unstable than they thought, and it got them into trouble with the wrong people? At worst, the head? Who knows, they might have even caused their own destruction. It's unclear about that. All that can be confirmed is that they're gone. And if Herman was with Encore when they snapped her up, that clearly shows how significant she is and how valuable she is to them. And it would appear that there are reasons that Virgilius wasn't joining them in the retrieval of the golden bars. Well, besides it making it too easy. Yes, he has his own EGO and a few augmentations, including utilizing Sin, like the trio that he tore into, which was implied to be affiliated with Iori, the Purple Tear. It's also because he needed the damn dozen to resonate with the golden bars, to deal with their pasts. In the case of Gregor, it was his experiences as a child soldier fighting in the Smoke War, and him being controlled by Herman, along with the pain that as long as his biomimetic arm, that was not only more stable than most of the augmentation types that G-Corp provided, which also had a healing factor, is on him, he could never go back to normal society, where he even had to sell any mementos of G-Corp to pay the landlord. As for what Limbus Company does, they send the before team to recon the area, send the after team to retrieve the abnormalities, EGO, and anything else that's either useful or needs containing. The dam doesn't do everything in between. Yeah, Gubo definitely has some connection with Encore, a wing that's seen as big on pointless activities, once even being described as being similar in nature to those mad artists of the ring. I doubt that we've seen the last of those two, or Ji-Huan. They're clearly the main antagonist group. Yes, antagonists. Definitely. As for what this chapter represents, it represents the gates of hell, specifically in the Divine Comedy. Yes, abandon all hope ye who enter here. Yes, as in that part of the Divine Comedy, what could be heard was the screams of the uncommitted, those that believed that there was no such thing as good or evil, that there was no sides, both human and divine. They were chased around that place by swarms of stinging insects, while maggots and worms feasted on their bleeding, representing guilt and their sin, along with spiritual stagnation. This is certainly applicable to this chapter, as insects were a theme on this. There was even maggots. And this was partly due to old G-Corp's augmentation process. Then there's Hopkins not taking a side and being an opportunistic. As for guilt, Yuri felt that when she got out of that branch, leaving the others for dead. I'll be covering this kind of thing in other chapter lore videos. I just didn't want to do that at the start of this. Yeah. Dante Alighieri clearly saw things entirely in black and white, as in, you're either with us or against us. Which is why in the Divine Comedy, those that would prefer to remain neutral around the actual gates of hell are looked down on, almost as much as those that took the wrong side. Then there's the belief that only certain people are deserving of heaven, and everyone else wandered around purgatory or gets sent straight to hell. Where in that they went, well, it depended on what they did in life. And he included many of his enemies there, in different parts of it. Is this a sign of him being a manic egocentric? Well, it certainly seems to be the typical mentality of those within the city. While morality in the Project Moon universe is largely blurry, the overall dominant ideology is one that encourages less than healthy attitudes, such as being self-serving, violent, and cruel. Think the "greed is good" speech from the 1987 movie Wall Street, but much worse. You'd think that there'd be some small pockets of those that follow a more altruistic ideology somewhere within the city. Well, that will certainly appear in Chapter 2. Let's just say that much.
있을 뿐이었어.
Chapter 1 ended on a dark note. Chapter 2, let's just say it will be brighter. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!